Let's start with just the normal cross. The input is the most simple one. With the default button layout, you just press the square button on PlayStation or the X button on Xbox, which we will refer to as the crossing button from now on. When you're on the wing in the crossing zone, your player crosses the ball inside the box. This is just the default way to play a cross. Your player inside the box usually will try to convert it with a header, but if he has enough time and also enough room, he can position himself in a way that he can also go for a volley. And by the way, for demonstration purposes, we set the AI to a low difficulty to showcase all these different variants. So don't expect to always have as much space. Low cross is a well-known tool in FIFA to score goals, and we already have a tutorial about it, but for FIFA 20. Even though the instructions are slightly different, we still recommend watching this video, because it explains a lot about the situations at which you can utilize this cross to your advantage. In FIFA 21, the low cross only works with a double tap of the crossing button. So you have to press it once to power up your cross and then tap it a second time to give the instructions for a low cross. In FIFA 20, it was also possible to do it with the R1 or RB button without the double tap, but this is now occupied by the driven cross as shown earlier. At the end we come to a real special one. I have to admit that I'm really fascinated by this cross. It's the low driven one. And the first few times I did it, I couldn't believe my eyes. Basically, you do a low cross with a double tap of the crossing button while you hold R1 or RB as the modification. The result is a low cross which is played super hard. But keep in mind that this footage isn't from the final game and therefore it might be not as hard when you try it out. Because I think if it stays like this, it's a little bit too good. So this cross is particularly useful when you see that your attacker is open inside the box and no defender is in a position to block the cross. With a low driven cross, you get the ball right to your attacker to bang it in. Everybody who played FIFA 19 is more than familiar with a high cross that you play by using the L1 or LB button as the modification. Why? Because this cross was totally overpowered back then. Well, anyway, it's still in the game and travels quite long in the air due to its high arc. This does give your players a lot of time to get in a position to go for the cross, but this is also the case for the opponent's defenders. Therefore, it's not recommended to use this cross when you have an open player inside the box, since it does give the opponent too much time to contest it. I think the best situation to use it is when you know that you have a clear mismatch between your player and the opponent's one, meaning you have a player which is an absolute god in the air due to his height and or jumping. With that long travel time, you get in a proper position to then outjump the opponent. Next up we have the driven cross, which is one of the new variants in FIFA 21. Similar to the driven pass, you use the R1 or RB button as a modification for the cross. So hold this button while you press the crossing button and the result is a more powerful cross which also tends to travel at waist height. That way your attacker is more likely to score from a volley with a driven cross. This cross is particularly useful when you see that your player is in front of the defender and open, because the driven cross is very fast and therefore you can rapidly take advantage of this situation inside the box. The whipped cross is a new and in my opinion one of the most interesting variants in FIFA 21. You play it by using both shoulder bumpers, so L1 plus R1 or LB plus RB. The cross is played with some undercut and therefore travels for some time in the air, but not as high as the high lob cross. This makes it very dangerous because there are a lot of positions from which your player can try to convert it. Especially when your attacker has some free space to move into, he can get to the cross without an opponent interfering, since the whipped cross tends to be played in a leading way, meaning more forward, closer to the goal. This makes this variant so dangerous and hard to defend.